All right, everybody. Welcome to Beyond the Letter. We are redoing this intro because I forgot to do it at the top of the show. So you're hearing this at the top of the show, but we're filming this at the end of the show. So I'll tell you this. It's a great episode. We talk a lot. This is really a faith-based episode for sure. So we talk a lot about faith, a lot about young people, church culture, preaching. It's a fun episode. So we got Will in the house hanging out with us. We got Chelsea at the table.
What's up, y'all?
We got H. Heron in the house.
Yes, sir.
The reason why we call him just H is because when you say Heron, everyone thinks you say Aaron. So everyone just says H. We got H here. We got Javi hanging out in here. And we got Phil, who came in at the end, and Andy in the house. We had some other people at the beginning. You'll see Nancy and stuff like that who have all stepped out. So it's a great episode. So make sure you tune in. So whether you're listening to us on audio or YouTube, we're going to get into it. Yeah.
Mormons is like a part of it's like a requirement, right? For their missionary journey.
Yeah. 2 years.
Around 2 years of that?
Yeah. When they turn 18, they got to go 2 year missions. I think, it's been a long time since I studied Mormonism, but the girls have to do something different. The guys have to go and do the mission stuff, but I think girls do a different type of mission, if I remember right. Because the guys have to go door to door.
I've never seen
a girl.
Yeah, they do something else. They like serve in the church or something, but they still have to travel, I think. But the guys, they have to go for 2 years to.
I was probably like 14 or 15, walking the neighborhood, and these Mormons come, and I knew what they were about to do. So we were just having a conversation, and my dad drives by, and he sees me just talking to 3 dudes in the neighborhood. And so he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm arguing with these guys about Jesus, Dad. Give me a second.
Yeah.
So when I was younger, it was like a challenge for me. But yeah, I've never seen, as I think about it, women like going door to door.
I don't think they're able to. I remember, actually, two of me and Heron's friends from Masters. We were, I was at Masters for 2.5 years, almost 3 years. And one of my superpowers is the ability to come off as stupid. So it's like a superpower, So
explain that, please.
Well, some people who are like really smart, they just start talking, and then you just know they're smart. One of my superpowers is like able to conceal that and just be a chameleon. I can. I forget what it is. Like it's called culture projecting or something like that. Like I can meet someone from each culture and like immediately find something to relate to. And so I'm not just independently always trying to like come off as someone who, especially in the area of religion, knows a lot. Like I like when people think like, oh, he's actually a pretty simple guy. It's like, then I did a good job. Even in my preaching style, when they're like, your preaching is very simple to understand. It's easy to understand. I'm like, that's great because it takes me 30 hours a week to sound simple of study, So it's like that level of stuff. So I was at college with a couple of our buddies, and then I knew them for like over 2 years. And then we're in Riverside one day, and these Mormons come up to us, and they first go up to them, and they start sharing about their faith, and we're all young, right out of college, so we're all like, oh yeah, like everybody's amped that they get to talk to some Mormons and kind of debate religion, and so they're like going at it, and then they're kind of and these guys were all like, the 2 of our friends, they were like straight A students, and me, I struggled in classes. H remembers an apologetic class or whatever. I'd be falling asleep or whatever. So Aaron's got pictures of me from back in college sleeping in class. So they're kind of getting stumped, and then I step in and I just take these 2 kids on a clinic. Just they had to call their elder over, and the elder had to come and interject, and because they have these like depending on where they're at, there's an older person in their 30s, an elder nearby, that they can call over in case they're in trouble in terms of debate and they need someone to help. Or there's also a term where, like, if they're starting to question their own faith, they're obligated to alert that elder to come in and, like, reestablish them. So what that was happening, we started having them actually question their own faith. So one of the kids started getting really anxious because another kid said, you might be right about something in particular I said. And so the other kid got nervous and like called the guy over. So they came, and then the elder came over, and then we talked again for like another 40 minutes. And then when they left, the 2 of my friends turned around and they were like, bro, you're actually smart? And they're like, we've never heard you like debate anyone. We've never heard you argue with anyone. We've never heard you quote scripture. We've never heard. And then I was just like, man, I lost my relationship with my dad over this stuff. I went from life to masters to so by the time I had gotten in my late middle 20s, I was just like, I'm not gonna argue with people anymore.
Yeah.
Like I've lost so many loved ones for just arguing because that's what I loved to do. And so then I had just decided like, man, I'm just gonna be like a peacemaker with everybody as much as I can, or else now as I gotten older, I've kind of in the balance where I'll do both. But at the time, it was just like I never wanted to.
Were you the type to argue just for the sake of liking to argue, or did you genuinely not believe in the theology of other people, like Pastor Diego, for instance?
I believe I figured the world out. I had believed I figured.
That's what happens.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you're
Yeah.
so tight into that reform circle for
Yeah.
a season.
Yeah.
Because they talk in absolutes.
Oh, it's
like it's
Yes.
like absolutes, and
Yeah.
they make everyone else feel like they're
We have no idea
ignorant.
what's going on.
Yeah. I still remember when when we were in a room together with Brad at Young Guns. We didn't even talk until that one day he opened
Later on that night.
No, but like during a session, I remember you opened your mouth.
Oh.
And I was like, who is that guy? Like, that dude is sharp. Like he is brilliant. Yeah, I still remember what you said because we were going around kind of introducing ourselves after the second morning.
Like, what have you gotten so far
Yeah,
since you've been here?
I don't remember exactly.
Yeah.
I just know it was a collective conversation. I don't remember what the context was. And then you said something like, when David went to go kill Goliath, he took, how many stones did he take with him?
5
stones. And he said because Goliath had 4 brothers, and after he killed Goliath, he was ready to kill 4 of his brothers as well. I remember I was like, first of all, I've never heard that. I was like, and the way you delivered it is so just like.
It's chill, yeah.
It's just like, because in rooms like that.
That is his superpower as well.
No, but also, my point is, rooms like that, a lot of guys are like peacocking. Like a lot of guys in
For
rooms like
sure.
that. Not that Brad's like that at all.
No,
but it
Brad's
just so happens when you get a room full of influential leaders, a lot of them
Someone's bound to want to.
they're just
show their feathers.
But
a
Adam
little
was
bit.
just quiet the whole time.
Yeah.
When the dude did talk.
Yeah.
I remember that was when, I think that was before you met Sammy too.
Yeah, it was.
Sammy looked at him, he leaned over, he's like, that guy's not normal. That was the exact phrase. He's like, he's not normal. And
That was the first weekend I met Brad too. Who he's going to be on the
Yeah.
podcast with us next week, but one of our heroes now. But that was the first weekend I met Brad too, and Dave Gibbons was there first weekend I met him, and then the very last night he gave a final word, and it was to me, and he said, "You don't talk enough. You got to talk more."
Yeah, I remember that.
Which, like in our community, that would be a foreign idea that
Yeah.
Pastor
Yeah,
Adam
yeah.
doesn't talk a lot. You know,
Yeah.
it's like that's all. Isn't that all the guy does? It's like, well, I do because I have to. I have to preach. I have to lead. I have to. But like outside of my community, I tend to be more of the quiet, reserved person.
Yeah.
Partly because I don't want to get myself in trouble, but also because I want to listen. I want to listen to everyone first because I get excited, and so I try to let everyone speak first.
You ever read that book? Y'all know that book, 48 Laws of Power?
You've talked
Yes.
about it with
Y'all
me
don't know
before.
that book?
You and I actually hung out in my backyard one
We're
time,
talking
and you
about
laid
it?
out the whole book
Bro.
because you said it was like my life philosophy, basically.
That
I had never
book
read
is
it.
like demonic.
yeah.
It's like
Are you
Machiavelli,
are you
anti-Christian,
serious?
but
Oh yeah.
It's-
Because I talked about it on the podcast. I listened to him talk about it. I didn't read
It's
the
like
book.
alchemy, it's like people that get into law and science, but like it's like a humanity hack, but not in like
But
a
when I-
Christ-centric way.
But
you
when I
know?
read that book for the first time, I was like, oh my God, I do all this.
yeah.
Like in my, just to survive the streets, It's like,
No way.
like law number 1 is never outshine your master.
Yeah.
Another law is like eliminate your enemy completely. Another law is, this is why it says, another law is act stupid. It's like always act stupid. It's like anytime you in a meeting, what? I had no idea.
Tell me more.
Yeah, but you're an expert in it. You're a PhD in it. Or another law is always know more about your enemies than they know about you. Another law is act unpredictable. All these stuff. I was reading and I was like, oh my God.
I do those things.
Oh my God, Lord, help me, Jesus. But I always tell my people, like, hey, it's good to know these laws to know when you need to.
Yeah.
You leverage these laws.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's Jesus' words. You be as wise as a serpent and soft
Gentle.
as a dove.
Yes,
Gentle as
sir.
a dove. Like that's to me that's a verse that's always tripped me out because the anytime the serpent is referenced, it's normally referenced to the Satan in Genesis.
Yeah.
So the fact that look at the rooster.
Yo, Heron's downloading the book right now.
Is this a book?
That's the book, bro. They made a new version, a revised version with 50 Cent, and they added
No,
two
they
more.
did not. Are you serious?
If I remember correctly, I think 50.
I'm reading it then.
And Robert Greene
100%.
added
If you have
2 more
50
laws.
cents, take it to the
50 for sure be using that on his Instagram, dog.
Oh,
He
for
be
sure.
just dangling stuff over people's head.
yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah. Those are crazy books.
I'll
Yeah.
have to check it out.
But when I
why-
first hung out with Adam, I was like, oh, this dude, he's sharp, smart.
I don't be
For
saying
sure.
thank you.
For
That's
Sure.
kind.
I remember
Thank
the
you.
first
Thank
time I
you.
met him. In various instances too. Like we were one time. I had a book of just theological books stacked up, and we're in the library. He just had one book, and I'm like, who is you in the library? You got to you're in seminary, going to
Yeah.
Bible college, you're reading, and then we start talking about theology, and he just expounds on this idea. I'm like, man, he has one book. I have 7 books, and I'm like, man, who is this guy? So it was stories like that. Just
The other first time I transfer into this college, and man, I want to make friends so bad. I don't know anybody at this college, and so it seemed like everybody knew everyone. And so my roommate, I was assigned with it because I got into the school's apartment complexes. I didn't want to stay on site at the school, so I had an apartment complex. So my buddy Blaze, who was in he was in like a UCLA ROTC program, but it was at school at Masters because he wanted to do counseling. So he tells me, hey, I have some friends who are going to Israel. And now, mind you, this was like an all-white school, right? So he's like, but Blaze is white, but like Blaze is probably a better freestyler than like even all the, what's that YouTube channel where guys just like freestyle rap, the Cypher or whatever?
yeah.
The Blaze could be on that all day as a white guy. I mean, we used to like put on beats and he could freestyle like crazy. So he had some soul in him for sure. So he's like, hey, my friends go to Israel tomorrow. But they came to school early. They have nowhere to stay because they don't let them stay in the dorms. They don't have a dorm room. Like, do you mind in our apartment if like just like 6 guys crash in our apartment? And like me desperately wanting friends, I'm like, yeah, for sure. So Heron was one of, and they were all like black guys and minorities. So Heron being Polynesian, the rest were black. I'm like, dude, are these guys like the only black guys in the school? So I was like, man, that's pretty cool. So we all kind of hit it off. We only spend the evening talking, but they're really Blaze's friends. So they're like hanging around Blaze. I'm kind of coming in and like just chatting it up. So they leave an entire semester. They come back for Christmas break, and then Heron and one of the other guys that came back, they're staying at our apartment again one more night before they go back to things. So they were actually going to go on campus and like do stuff. I still didn't know anyone. I only knew Blaze that semester still. It was hard to get to know anybody coming as like a Pentecostal kid to a Reformed school. It was kind of like everyone was still like very skeptical of me. So especially coming in as a
surprised
junior.
they accepted you.
I know, right? Yeah. So I go to Heron and our other friend. And I was like, "Hey guys," which I had no plans to do. Many of you guys know me. I don't care too much for sports at all. So I was like, "Hey guys, I don't know if you remember this. I said, I'm going to Round Table, and I'm gonna buy a piece of pizza. Like I'm gonna buy a big because they were broke college students. I had my marketing company back then, so I was like, I'm going to Round Table. I'm gonna watch the game and order a piece of pizza. Like if you guys want to come." And then him and the other buddy were like, "Bro, free, like for free, And I'm like, "Yeah, I got it. I'll cover the drinks. I'll cover the pizza, blah blah." And they're like, "Yeah, let's do it." So then our first actual hangout was like we went out to Round Table and we watched a basketball game. I think it was basketball. And then I was like, after that evening, I was like, oh, I think I made some friends. And thankfully they're not the like homeschool kids that are all at Masters, like these guys are real guys that like
You got the
understand
ones,
me,
Everyone that has a testimony.
Yeah, right.
That whole crew got together.
Because our other friend that was there, he sold drugs in Detroit and got saved. Heron grew up around the TCG, Tongan Crip gang, but his dad was Assemblies of God, Tonga president. So like he came from a Pentecostal background. And Heron actually went to the high school of all my brothers, and Heron went to Abundant when he was younger a couple times. Mm-hmm. So it was like, he's like, you're Pastor Diego's son. And I'm like, what? How do you know? I'm like, dude, I can't get away from my dad. Right. It was like, I felt like I couldn't get away. Yeah. So that was great. That was our first time. But goes back to like me. I was like, man, I just want to meet some friends so bad. So I'm like, I'll buy pizza, offer it for free. And then 14 years later, still my best friend. You know, like
So if you
that's how
need
it goes.
friends,
Just
invite
go buy
somebody
pizza.
else. Some
That's
pizza.
Go buy pizza, and invite everybody to.
I can't imagine going to Masters, man.
Me either.
Because I've never been
Something
there.
for the
but
dress code for women.
It's like super
Yeah.
strict, right? Like
Yeah.
like
It's extremely
super
strict. You can't dance at all for any reason. You have to sign a contract. Like even if you went to your sister's wedding, you couldn't.
Yeah.
You can't
Yeah.
dance. If a student tells on you, and students will tell on you. If you now in the age of social media, it'd be impossible. Back then, we didn't really have social media.
So you wouldn't even be able to do like a TikTok dance.
No.
That is wild.
No.
It's a sad life.
That is
No alcohol, no dancing, no tobacco of any
graphic
kind.
t-shirts.
Yeah.
It has to be plain.
No
As a
graphic shirts.
Yeah, that wouldn't be allowed. Yeah.
As
Yeah.
a student.
As a student.
Yeah.
Sheesh.
Maybe like
Maybe-
maybe like 10 years prior to even when we got there, it was tie. You had to wear a tie to class every day, and women had to wear like dresses. That loosened up by the time we were there. But still, it was.
How about tattoos?
You could have tattoos, but you couldn't actively get any.
Yeah.
So if you had them when you came in, that was one thing. But I snuck out a couple times and got tattoos, and I had them on my chest and stuff like that. But yeah, it was extremely strict, and it was extremely like people were looking for. At least it felt like to me, like people were looking for you to make a mistake to be able to share with the dean or someone else. But the professors were amazing. Like hated the school culture.
Right, yeah.
All of the Bible
Interesting.
professors, all the theology professors thought the school student
extreme.
life side was a joke. They would make fun of it all the time. So there was two different cultures. It was like you loved your professors and you hated student life, or you loved student life because you were like a homeschool kid or whatever,
sure.
and then the professors to you were a little liberal because they didn't,
Crazy.
weren't blah 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 blah. But I'm actively trying to, and I'm reaching out to school because the professor who changed my life and got me to come back to my dad's church, I've been trying to look him up, and there's no information on him online. I want to invite him to my
The service.
my senior pastor installation in April. So I want to invite him, but I just sent an email to the school to see if anybody has a contact. He would have been in his 70s when I was there. And then their website
again?
says he retired, Professor Jim Owen, the historical theology,
yeah,
old
yeah.
guy with the cowboy hat. He retired in 2017. So he'd be like in his late 80s now. So Lord willing, he's still alive. But all I could find for Masters was a little blog post that said this year, here's the teachers that retired. There were 3. He was one of them, 2017. So, which is like 6 years ago from now. So I'm like, hopefully he's still alive. If he's not, or if he is and he can't come because he's just older and he lives far away, I'll at least try to go visit him and bring him something. I haven't talked to him since I left. Not because I didn't want to, but we all know professors. They're nice when you're there and they care about you, but they get 30 new students every semester on top of the other classes they're teaching. So they care while you're in class, but once you get out, they can't handle knowing you because they got another batch of 120 kids coming in.
Yeah.
So it's not like I didn't want to keep in touch. It's just like, well, what do I say? And then only until I've gotten older have I really valued what he did for me.
That'd be cool to have him.
Yeah, well, that's why we went. That's why we went to
I would love
Biola,
for you.
dude.
Listen.
We was chilling. We was chilling.
But that's not a good thing,
We
bro.
was chilling. Man, I'm about to share a crazy story. I don't know if I should. Did you know missions conference at Biola, right?
Yes, that's where I actually met.
Our crew used to travel for missions conference every
Did y'all
year.
hear what happened last week at the missions conference?
No.
We literally would go every year when
What
we were
happened?
masters.
This is crazy. Well,
Because Lecrae did something one year, right?
Yeah.
We talked and we went to that
Yep.
one.
this is
Yeah.
crazy.
Crazy.
So I was there because our church worship team actually led.
You were there last week.
I was there last because our church worship team led
Okay.
for missions
For
conference
missions,
worship.
yeah.
So I went to go show support. Bro, it was wild. The speaker, he's in his 70s, or is he maybe 80s? He's an old dude, old head, missions guy. Apparently, he leads the world's largest Sunday school. He just went like off.
The world's what does that
Largest Sunday school. It's hard to explain. His name is Pastor Bill something. You could look it up.
Okay.
But he opens up, and I look at my wife, and I was like, literally, as the person that he brought with him introduced him, I looked at my wife and said, "This don't feel good. This don't feel good. The way she's talking about him just doesn't feel like this is gonna go well."
mean? The person introducing
The
him.
person introducing him is like his executive staff.
So give me an idea. What is she saying?
She just like worshipped him.
Papa. She called him Papa.
No, but it was like, you know what I'm saying?
You know there'd be those weird
I cannot
Pentecostal
stand
sermons
that.
be
Papa
like
God.
Papa. No, not Papa God. Like,
just Papa?
if you're a spiritual
so they're
like,
Papa.
leader, that's
Yeah.
Papa. You know,
Yeah.
Like
you got to give a
and
gift
so
for Papa's
she
birthday.
she was an Asian lady. I think she was from Hong Kong or Taiwan, and she has an accent, but she's like, I was working in NorCal in the tech industry, and I met Pastor Bill, and my life was changed forever. It was just very like, there's honor and there's like worship.
Worship, yeah.
And usually worship is either one or two things, cult or abuse, right? So anyways, all that to be said. Ain't no masters no more. But yo, check this out.
He's preaching right now.
He goes up and he just starts saying like crying little crazy stuff. Like at first it was funny, old guy cracking jokes. He starts off by saying the current president and the party, they're a bunch of pinheads. Okay, maybe just one of those right-wing guys, cool. And then he goes on to say like, if the person next to you is sleeping, slap them in the face for me, right? Okay, it's kind of funny. And then he goes like, I'm famous in ORU. Because when I spoke at ORU 15 years ago, a guy was sleeping and I slapped him in his face. And then, okay,
all right. Yeah, now it's getting real.
And then he shows a clip from
of him slapping somebody?
Nah, like a clip of a kid in Africa getting like smashed and bleeding all out of his face. The kid was like this tall, probably like a 3-year-old, and he shows it, and some of the students are screaming, right? And then he says he says something like, "These people are mentally retarded." He's just going off. I'm talking. He's going.
The person abusing the child or the
he on the mic. Like it was just.
Who's mentally retarded though?
I don't even remember. He was telling a story. Oh, that person is just mentally retarded, and then so getting crazy, right? And then
who booked my man?
Yeah, check this out.
Right.
They put on the monitor, "Hey, you need to get off stage." They say that
on the conference
monitor, and he says, "I can read. I'm not going nowhere." And then in his intro, I forgot. He says, like, I've been shot at, and he has been shot in the face. He's like, that's why I got 2 bodyguards with me, and they have guns on me, so y'all don't play with me.
No, he didn't.
All these comments. Wow. And then they put on the monitor screen, like, get off.
They turned his mic off?
And they started turning his mic down. He said, don't turn my mic down. Raise my mic. Raise it high. I'm talking bonkers. This is all happening. 5,000 students in the auditorium. I'm there.
And your team just led worship?
I'm texting my staff member, one of my staff, our worship team. One of them, she wore a Whitney Houston shirt too, right? I was like, you better change your Whitney Houston shirt, girl. We're just playing around. And then the campus director or whatever goes on while he's mid-sentence, around 15 minutes in, and says, Pastor Bill, we thank you so much. We're so grateful for your ministry. And he looks to the audience and says, anyone else who needs counseling, you need to talk to somebody from the trauma that you just went through. We have staff outside. So they kicked him off mid his session. Wow. And then like hundreds of students were outside in circles crying and like traumatized. That video clip, like I couldn't watch it, even if I was at home by myself.
Yeah.
Because they're being like gashed. And he even said, and by the way, your guys' brains aren't even fully developed yet on the mic because you're 21? He's like, the human brain isn't develop until you're 25. Like he was just, Biola removed that video.
Got that offense up on everybody.
They made an Instagram post. I was so sorry.
No way.
So maybe Masters is a better idea. But all I have to say,
Masters would never, bro. They would never do it. They invite the same 4 speakers in rotation every year. You get Paul Washer, Bodie Baca, Piper.
I got a story about Paul Washer.
Or internal professors.
Were you there when that Paul Washer incident happened?
I came right after the semester after because my second roommate, his dad was on maintenance over there.
So get this, Paul Washer gets invited, right? Everyone knows Paul Washer, right?
If you don't know Paul Washer, go on YouTube and get lost in his clips. You'll feel more convicted you ever had in your life.
Paul Washer. And that crew, he's my favorite.
Yeah. So he gets on stage, he does his thing, and then midway through, he says, "You're all going to hell. You're going to die. If you die now, you're going to go to hell. If you don't repent."
This is at Masters?
This is at Masters. Uh-huh. And then he didn't even close, so he just walked out the door. He makes that statement and walks out the door, and everyone stays in that room for like 25 minutes. just stunned, like, man, like he just,
what's
condemned us, and then afterwards.
And then just left.
And just left, yeah. And afterwards, they had small groups. People were praying. People were,
confessing
Crying.
sin. And they're like,
If
what
Paul
sins do you want to
tells you you're
confess?
going to hell, then,
Yeah, so it was dead quiet, though, for at least 15 minutes when he left the stage.
But that was
silence.
but that was under like conviction, you would say, right?
for him.
For him.
As in for like, was the room like convicted and there
Or
was a sense of
condemned.
like holiness, or was it like like
condemnation.
No, it was more condemnation.
Yeah, that room wouldn't have been convicted.
Yeah, no, because I mean, you got the basketball team behind me.
Yeah.
You got
Yeah,
the
yeah.
volleyball team on
Yeah.
the left side. So it just felt
Yeah.
really like, man, this is crazy.
I feel like talks like that, and even this guy, I was texting my wife. I think the difference is like I feel like millennials and Xers, they would take it. I feel like I feel like we were like, yeah, I suck.
100%.
Gen Z don't play. That's what I felt. I was like, yo, I think he was so used to speaking to like Xers and
Yeah.
millennials. He forgot like these are Gen Zers. So these
And it's a
kids were
different group.
standing up, walking out, like
Yeah.
forget this. They were like, nah, we ain't putting up with this abuse. Like we're not even. So I was like, this dude. So even like Washer, at least for me, when I used to listen to people like Washer, Chandler,
Yeah.
Driscoll, Piper, I'm like, yeah, I suck. I'm like, tell me I suck so I can repent more.
that
right?
was the man. Chandler
Gen Z is
style
like,
back
Gen
then.
Z is like, I'm great. Like, I can change the world. Don't tell me I suck. You're not my dad. Like, you suck, Pastor. I'm gonna cancel you right now.
You failed us.
But I feel like I could tell, like, because I went to Bible. I haven't been on campus for like, I don't know, like almost 10 years. But when I went to missions conference to show support, I was, these kids are different. Like they just,
Yeah, very, very.
yeah,
different.
in a
Missions
good
conference is
way.
where I felt my very first call to ministry. So I had never really seen a female preach the gospel until I went to missions conference. And you don't go to classes for a whole week, and you have to go to a certain amount of sessions for mission. And I went to all 7 or 8 required, but I loved it so much. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go to one more, and I'm gonna invite all my teammates, because the sports team on college campuses are like the ones that really need to be saved. So I forced all my teammates to go, and so I'm hearing this woman preach, and I'm like, oh, I didn't know that was like a thing. And then she was good. So I turned to my teammates. I was like, I'm going to work for that person one day. They're like, shut up, babe.
Turned out to be Vice President Kamala Harris.
Be quiet. Long story short, I ended up working for that woman in Planet.
Who's the?
It was Bianca Olthoff.
Oh, Bianca.
In Orange County.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, she
So
spoke for missions.
She spoke for missions, and
Okay,
it
okay,
blew
okay.
my mind. She was working for
I mean, she's a
A21 at the
beast.
time. Yeah,
Yeah,
she was
yeah,
working
yeah.
for A21 under Christine Kane at the time. So
Yeah.
she
Yeah.
was telling those human trafficking stories, and it was blowing my mind how
Yeah,
she was
yeah,
communicating the gospel through it all. So missions conference for me, I'm sorry to Biola students this year, but for me, it was amazing. Like it changed
Yeah.
my life. Yeah.
Sometimes you just need permission, dude. You need to see someone
somebody
that gives
do
you
it.
permission to be like, okay, if they can do it, I can do it. They look like me,
100%.
they talk like me.
And there's a
100%.
reason why we all trucked down for masters, is because masters wouldn't do something like that.
So y'all will
And
come through to the
yeah, we
Biola
would go to
Missions
missions.
Conference.
We'd go to the
Tory
last
com-
evening. We normally go because we had classes and stuff, so we'd go like whatever it was, Thursday night, Friday night, or
nighttime.
whatever.
Yeah.
And then we'd get a meal. Our Steve Ross, who was like a mentor figure to us, he's like maybe like 10 years older than us. He was like he was like the before diversity, equity, inclusion even existed. He was like master's diversity hire. So he like basically would corral all the Black and Hispanic minority Bible students,
Yeah,
which were
yeah,
only
yeah.
like
All
10
4.
of us. And he would like truck us down to Biola and take us to the missions conference and stuff. So we went pretty much every year for a couple of years. And
Even when I was
they were
when
great.
I was a
Yeah.
student, those conferences, I get marked.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, they were
100%.
great. Yeah, worship was always terrible, but I'm
It was
sure,
good. It was
I'm glad
good
you
this
got.
year,
That's
though.
what I'm
It
about
was
to say.
All of our
That's
hymns.
what I'm about to say.
I was
They
so
upped
proud
it
of
now,
them, dude.
bro.
It went wild.
Well,
bro.
because you got to think like at Masters, when they do our chapels, they do chapels with cellos, violins, harps. So
Yeah.
you're getting like Mozart level worship. I mean, even if you don't even if you like contemporary Christian, you can't not go to Masters during their chapels. And, because these students are like chorale champs, and they all been singing hymns since they were kids, and they're in choir since they were kids. So we would have modern worship days, which were probably predominant, which modern was just like a piano, drums, and like maybe that was about it. And then
Maybe a guitar.
maybe sometimes a guitar, and then the other 50% was the strings team. So like you're literally getting worship every week in with harps and violins and
that's kinda
cellos.
dope.
And, yeah, so it was dope.
Yeah.
So we go over to Biola, and they're like,
Yeah, what is this?
they're not ancient and they're not
College
modern.
students
Yeah.
trying to
You know,
play
like
GCDE.
Yep.
and they're like many of those kids are going into like worship and
Yeah,
arts,
yeah,
and
yeah,
so
yeah,
it was just we were just like, let's go in after worship.
Yeah, I remember.
yeah. But I know y'all killed it. You probably were the best part of that day.
They
to be
brought it.
honest.
So after the guy came up and basically apologized,
They dismissed him.
dismissed everybody?
And then I don't know if this is true, but I heard he was escorted off campus.
I'm sure.
And, then, and
he
people were
was.
worried because that's when he said I have bodyguards with guns.
Yeah.
So I heard like people were just kind of, and so I saw security coming in, like police
can't say that's
officers.
There's a lot of things he shouldn't have. What was the point of him showing the video? Did it tie in with his sermon?
You know,
He was probably trying to show the extreme nature of what goes on in the
Yeah,
outside world and
yeah.
thinking you guys are in a bubble. Like, no, they have social media. They
he
know
was-
what's going
They
on.
know.
he was
Yeah.
doing that thing. You know those people, like those leaders who think the next generation are a bunch of softies, and I need to like
Toughen them up.
toughen them up. But he just went like 3 notches. Like
Yeah.
that was
That is
cool.
My
wild
dad
to
did
me.
something many years ago, and he had a guy kind of like that. Not exactly, but he was kind of like that. He was talking sexually, wrong. He was like preaching, but he went a little too
Yeah.
detailed about sex and stuff like that and other stuff. And the guy was doing 2 sessions, so in between, my dad was like, "Hey, can you kind of tone it back? You just kind of it's coming off. I don't really teach my congregation that way. I don't want anyone to reject what you're saying just because of choice of words. Blah blah blah." Yeah. And then dude immediately gets up next session and he's like, sometimes people tell me they want me to tone it back, but that's their fault for not doing their homework and seeing what kind of communicator I am. So that's their fault. I'm gonna be me up here if that's all right with you. Is that all right with you, everybody? They're like, yeah, see, they want it. All right, we're gonna go, and you're like, bro, you can.
Those are the worst, man. Those are the worst.
Like you never get invited back, right?
those
Like
are
why
the worst.
why are you gonna do that?
So when you get speakers like to come to your guys' churches, you vet them through. It's basically if you know them and you know their reputation, right?
Nowadays, yes. The problem where you might mess up or make a mistake is like, let's just say, like to me, Will is very reputable. So anything Will co-signs on, like I'm cool with. Well, Will may know someone who he's had at one point in many years who maybe their ministry has changed and we just don't know or whatever. And I'm like, hey, Will, I'm really looking for someone that shares with this type of emphasis. Oh, man, I know somebody, blah, blah, blah. I known them for many years. They're great, blah, blah, blah. You should have them. So he co-signs on them. Mm-hmm. So then I asked them to come out. And then for some reason or Will does know that about the guy, but Will just doesn't think it's odd. And so then all of a sudden, we ask them to come. And then I'm like, bro, they came and did X, Y, and Z. And Will's like, oh, yeah, that's how their style is. I didn't tell you that. I didn't think that would be a big deal to you or whatever, right?
Yeah.
We're like in the charismatic space. You may get someone who blows on someone or throws their jacket on someone. And I go to my friend, I'm like, bro, we don't do that at our church. Why did you? And he's like, oh, I didn't, you're just my boy. I'm not sitting in your church services. So
Right.
I didn't know you guys didn't do that.
Yeah.
So then you're like, oh, so now I feel like millennials have gotten a lot, unfortunately, millennials both end. Some millennials should just be barred from going and speaking because they're jerks. But mostly millennials have done a good job at over communicating how a speaker is or what are you looking for or what do you, and then a lot of them are going off of real authentic relationship, which in the past, that baby boomer era, like almost none of them had relationships with anyone. They were just grinders. So the relationship they had with someone was just, will you speaking put more butts in my seat? Like that was the only math they did.
Yeah.
That was it. Like, will you put more butts in the seat and will you do what I want you to do in the sense of like whatever night you want? So if you're in the reform space, are you going to exposit the text and people are going to be gravitated toward that? Are you going to, so that was in the past. If you were in the reform circle, you're getting Paul Washer, you're getting John Piper because they get butts in seat. In our space, you're getting John Bevere, you're getting TD Jakes, because they put butts in seats. Where now it's a little like millennials aren't really, they don't tend to, because we have YouTube. And so the idea of like hearing a guy preach what he preached on YouTube at your church, that's not
For sure.
as much of an attraction anymore. So really you're just like, I want someone who's going to speak at my church who like speaks to us and wants to share with us and wants to care about us. And so it's a much different world with asking speakers to come to your church now.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
usually when I speak at like the large organizations, they have like a MOU. And there's like a little part that says, please don't talk about this,
I see.
this. Yeah. And I've had experiences where I'm like, oh, I got to create one of those.
What is that called?
It's like an MOU. It's like when you sign, like, I don't know what this
we
stands
do
for.
it. It's like memorandum. It's something like that.
Yeah, it's like a little contract.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, they send it, and it basically says, it'll say like last year I spoke at a church.
Oh, memorandum of understanding.
Yeah.
Okay.
So last year I spoke at a church, and it said, hey, we are biblically conservative. Here's what we do believe in 2 genders. We do not approve of LGBTQ lifestyles, but we reserve that heart to only be communicated by our senior pastors. So please do not go into this territory that is only reserved for people who know who are at this church every single week, who can speak to the heart of that. So please don't talk about those things. You can talk about X, Y, and Z. You know, Pastor Aaron's about to go speak at a church, and in it they have like dress code, how far they take the gifts of the Spirit, how far they don't. You know, if you're going to do these things, blah, blah. So most churches nowadays that maybe have millennial letter influence, they'll send over that. Some do it in a contract form where they want you to sign it. Others just want you to acknowledge that you received it, and so that you can respect their space. So that's, in the past, that kind of stuff was never done. But in the age of social media and everything can get clipped and everything's online,
For sure.
everyone's a lot more aware of how their church is personally represented. You know.
Sure.
We do the same, but we are probably more highly selective than many churches on like who we bring in our pulpit. In the past 7 years, is very limited who we have brought into our pulpit for those reasons. And we have diverse friends. So I have friends in the Reformed space, friends in the charismatic space. So even though I would love for them to share, it's just like, I don't know, you know,
If it
it's
fits
like,
our congregation.
I don't know if it's going to fit how we do things, because we are legitimately diverse as a church. And we've talked about it before. Like, we have people in our church that, you know, listen to preachers that exposit every week, and we have others that listen to, deliverance guys every week. And they're all sitting in church next to each other. Not every church has that dynamic going on.
Yes.
Other churches are just kind of everyone's kind of more so fit, which is fine. Like, I'm not even like saying that in a bragging way. I'm just saying that's what the Lord has done with our church, and the more diverse your church gets, the more you have to toe that line on culture and expression and all that kind of stuff like that. Sure. Well, you're a church planner though, so how do you do that? Like, how often are you having people share at your church, and if they are, what do you want them to share about being a church planner?
It's very similar to what you said. But most of it is just in house, and then like once or twice a year, it's always someone I know. Yeah. I've never been the type of person. I don't think I've ever had a guest speaker speak for me ever that I didn't have a friendship with.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's not even like a. Yeah, I didn't even think about it. As you were saying that, I was, I've never invited someone to speak that I didn't know or I've been deeply touched by, or like through their ministry. So it's usually a friend. But I've also learned, like, recently, like, even with some friends, I'm like, oh shoot, they said something that I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
All right. You know, I got to, for the future. That's why Adam and I talked about this actually off camera, and he was like, yeah, bro, you got to create a document and let them know, hey, these things are off topic, yada, yada, yada. I was like, oh, for sure.
Yeah.
So,
it's important, bro.
It is,
There's people
bro.
you love, but for whatever reason, some people feel like the moment they have the mic and the platform, like, it's their time to hit tough topics.
Yeah.
And we have a podcast where we deal with all types of tough topics.
Sure.
I don't ever feel like I have to go to someone else's platform. I just don't. But I have a problem with preaching contrarian to culture ways. Like, and we talked about it in a previous podcast. Like, I just feel like the gospel and the good. Like, I rarely heard, unless it's regarding a religious spirit, Like you read the Gospels, you rarely see Jesus critiquing or criticizing anything. He's always pointing to intrinsic introspection. He's always telling us to look at our own speck. And then, you know, I listen to so much preaching and it's just like log, or log, you know, like, and then I'm just like, the gospel is so rich without needing to do all. There is a time to do it. And if it's led prophetically in a way that the Spirit is provoking it and it's going to lead to repentance and not condemnation, then cool. I've done it at times, but it is very, very rare because I feel like I just, especially if I'm guest speaking, I'd never even think in my head, like, I'm going to touch politics with this group. I'm going to let them know what's really going on. Like, I just wouldn't do that. It just, conceptually to me, it's crazy. And so, but like, yeah, we have some people that in their pulpit, they're very highly political. And then we just tell them ahead of time, hey, we love your politics. We love what you're doing. We believe God has placed you to do these things. It's not something we do because we have, we've chose to enable a church that doesn't address those specific things that you do. So just hold back on it. Yeah.
Have you had anybody ever push back and say, well, actually, that's what I want to talk on, so I'm just going to pass on this? I don't think that would happen, right?
Not on our standards of where we do ministry, because even with Will being a church planner, Will comes from a very I don't know the word to choose from, so I'll just say it, and you can just say it's lack of a better term. But Will comes also from a very prestigious line of like doing ministry in a very high level and excellence and all that stuff like that. What you'll tend to get is more wavy stuff when you're in circles that are deal with extremisms. So like, let's just say we are extreme charismatic Pentecostal or we were extreme Reformed. The guest speakers you have in those spaces, they more so are the ones like, I'm going to be me, I'm a blah, blah, blah. But the fact that we tend to be a church that's a little bit more tries to minister to all and really keep the gospel centered, and we don't deal with too many of the outer areas of expressions of faith. We would never have a speaker that would even remotely, in many years ago we would, and my dad would actually draw big lines. So some people just don't come to our church anymore because they did refuse. Oh, wow. And they did just say, I'll try, and then they come. That's what they'll say, like, oh, I'll try to not talk about those things, and then they come and they do it, and then he's like, my dad's like, well, I warned you, I'm a one-strike guy. You know, like, I gave you my platform, I asked you not to do something, you did it, you're my friend, but you ain't gonna come on my platform. There has been stuff like that. And it's appropriate. I mean, it should happen, and it should be talked about more. It should be addressed more, you know, in the body and stuff like that. But yeah, it's an interesting aspect.
That's awesome.
That stuff will happen in like youth ministry and stuff. I went one place one time and they said, hey, could you please not talk about like tattoos or could you cover your tattoos? Yeah. But I had just arrived. Like, they didn't tell me ahead of time, so I'm wearing like a T-shirt and and I'm like, what did you guys think when you booked me? You know? And so I'm like, I looked at him and I was like, what? I looked down at my tattoo. I was like, what do you want me to do? Do you have a sweater or something like that? And because it was a youth thing. When I used to speak at adult churches prior to like where ministry is at now, I would ask them, would you like me to wear a blazer or blah, blah, blah? And sometimes they'd be like, no, we're purposely having you because, you know, we're kind of a little bit more of a rigid, you know, conservative church. And so we kind of want to shock our people with your look a little bit while you preach, you know. I'm like, okay, it's great. I'm fine with that. But that one because most youth ministries, they don't really give you any parameters in terms of what you wear and stuff like that. They actually want you to wear whatever you want. But this one, I was just like, you guys got a sweater or something? And they were like, no. Almost looking at me like, you should have been covered up. And I'm like, you guys were the ones who asked me to be here. And I've known you guys for years, and you'd see me. Like, you should have told me that ahead of time. So they were like, I think we'll be okay.
I used to be
You're going to have to be okay.
I used to be on that youth pastor circuit. Yeah. And I have so many instances where, like, I have stories for days, bro, as like guest speakers, like how they treated me, and I had to learn. Now I have a speaking forum to like even vet myself. Like, do I even want to speak at your spot, right? Because sometimes when you're like a person who goes around the circuit, people invite you that you don't know, right? So like, I've had a time once, bro, I was speaking at this youth retreat, And the pastor, he like kicks me off like right after I'm done preaching. Right? I said, okay, that's fine. You want to do the ministry time. And the next morning he like knocks on my door. He's like, hey, a lot of my students and my teachers, they want to talk to you. They want to get prayer from you, but I'm going to ask you not to talk to anyone in our ministry. All we're asking you to is preach and go back into your room, right? I've had stuff like that.
What?
I've had people like, because when you're a speaker, people will use.
They'll use the gift.
People will use you for their own agenda, but then they'll
Yeah.
create parameters to protect themselves from other spaces that they don't want you to
Yes.
invade in. Like
Yes.
if the kids like you more, or if they
Yes.
feel like you're gonna have too big of an influence, and they're not gonna have respect after you leave. Man, so now I have like a speaking form where I'm like, I could tell, they're way too controlling. Like I'm good. So
Yeah.
those are those crazy days, man.
Those
Crazy days, bro.
That used to be a different world. I feel like that world doesn't really exist anymore, and because I think social media, it's less.
Yeah.
Like to me, and you said it, like I love our communicators on our team, in our leadership team. Like I would choose them, 9 times out of 10 to teach our people than just a guest speaker who many aren't even going to care to know what's going on in the church. And, I recently spoke somewhere. I'm like, hey, tell me what the last service about. Tell me what season you guys are in. And they almost were like, why are you asking all that? And I'm like, I want to be a good guest. I want to be able to refer what happened last week. I want to know. I don't want to just come in and, drop a bomb and then walk out. And but for so many years, it's really not that way. And so, so many times I'm just like, man, I got great preachers in the house. I don't really need to do, because sometimes people in our church will ask, like, we don't have a lot of guest speakers like other churches I see in other places. I'm like, we also have a very strict criteria of like how to preach, structured. Speakers on our team get emails with structures. People get reviews on their speaking. So it's like, I'm like, we don't. It's just not like, oh yeah, that's your gift, go do it. I'm like,
sure.
we're gonna refine it and refine it and refine it. We're all gonna, if we speak, we're gonna be the best at what we can be of ourselves.
So do you guys, like as a preaching team, like you kind of co-create before and then do like feedback after for the speakers?
Yeah, so there tends to be like, there's like parameters on what they're talking about, depending on where they're at in their like speaking abilities. Yeah. So some now they get, basically, hey, here's kind of the roundabout. You have freedom inside of it, and then after we'll follow up anything if we need to, and some don't. Others who are like would be newer at it, they get structure. They have turned in their sermon notes ahead of time. We'll review the sermon notes. We'll make suggestions. Hey, don't open with that, or don't do that. Try this, or I'll like, hey, I challenge you. You normally do this. This is safe. So like many years ago, one time I told Pastor Aaron, like, I want to challenge you by, you're really good at doing this, but I want you to branch out, and I want you to use a couple elements of X, Y, and Z, and I don't want you to use any sermon illustrations. Because Pastor Aaron every time was doing a sermon illustration, and I said it's easy when you're only preaching, once every 4 months to use the best sermon illustration that you came up with. I said, but one day the Lord may up your frequency, and you're not going to because what happens is if you preach once every 90 days or once every couple months,
you feel anointed
because
you go every week.
You have 3 months to work on the message.
It's your best illustration. So like even when people come to me and they're like, man, that person's sermon on our team was so good, they should preach more. And I'm like, if they preached more, they wouldn't be as
that
good. Because they're using their best stuff
100%
over, that they
refining it.
And they refined it, refined it. They had 2 months to just sit on it. Whereas I have 3 days. I'm turning around a new sermon every 72 hours. I'm turning over a new sermon. So that was one of the things I go, man, your illustrations are always top notch, but it's because you have a lot of time to think them through. I want you to preach a sermon where no illustrations happen so that you can rely fully on, like that week, you just couldn't think of a sermon illustration, and you don't want to force the scriptures to bring one out of thin air. I said, so just imagine you got nothing, no illustration from it, and preach without it. And then that's going to stretch you in a new way, and so then there have been times now over the years, Pastor Aaron has asked to speak at youth camps where they ask him to preach 5 sermons over 1 week. And so then he's like, that helped because it made me feel like I didn't have to have an illustration or something.
Yeah,
yeah.
I didn't have to have 3 points. So sometimes I'll be like, don't use 3 points this time. Just try to, because not all, we want to, for us, we have a base structure. We have an intro, we have 3 points, we have a conclusion. That's what we have our staff do. But then as they get more locked in it, then there's freedom to like go outside of it, But yeah, we have a structure, and then we're going to, really in the next 90 days, we're going to do a all staff, not all staff, but all communicators preaching summit.
Oh,
and
that's
then
great.
And then we'll go really in depth.
Oh, that's
into some
great.
deeper
I'm like a
stuff.
student of communications. I'm like, I'm kind of like obsessive with communication.
Yeah,
So I'm like,
so am I.
like watching.
I got my degree in it too, so
Oh,
it's
you
all
did?
I think about. It's
Yeah.
hard for me to listen to a message and not think about their structure. So my notes are really structure of what they're doing. So I
Yeah,
have to
yeah.
like, Chelsea, just listen to the message, because I'm listening to how they construct,
Yeah.
how they're captivating people, their tone, their energy, all of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I got my
We even
degree.
have like a point system for our preachers. So
Really?
it's like
Explain
10
that.
categories, 5 points each. And then after
Wow.
they preach, they grade themselves, and then I grade them, and then I send it over, and then we talk. Like, all right, hey, you're really good with your exegetical,
Wow.
but then your tone was just 2. Yeah,
Yeah.
you went from
Or
0
you
to
had no
100.
application.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
application is
Yeah.
one of them.
Yeah.
Another one's like cultural relevance. You had no outside sources. It was just all Christian language. So the skeptic's not going to respect any of your objections. And we have personable.
Wow.
Like, is it personable? Did you have a moment where you felt like you were with the people? So I get like,
Oh, that's dope.
I get all like
That's dope.
nerdy with that. And there's so many
Yeah.
different types of preachers, right? There's like Judah. I always
Yeah.
say like Judah and Bishop Jakes are like narrative preachers, where like
Yeah,
they don't really have
storytellers
points. It's like
Yeah.
you're just in the story, and they're like,
Then
oh
you
my-
have the Chris Hodges, who
Yeah,
is
yeah.
very
Bop, bop,
structured.
bop.
Yeah.
Andy Stanley, Chris
Yeah.
Yes.
Hodges, very,
Yeah.
very, very scholastic in many ways,
Yeah.
but not overly,
Yeah.
exegetical.
So when I was a young preacher, being a youth pastor at 18, I was so curious, like how these pastors I looked up to, like prepared their messages, or like what was their like routine, and I didn't have any of that. So like now that I'm raising up young preachers, I'm like, yo, this is what you should do. This is what you should avoid. This joke lands with this crew, but it offends that group. Do you know you're doing that? Like, did you know you just pissed off half of our room?
Yeah.
Because when you're a youth pastor, like you could say whatever you want. You know what I mean? At least
Yeah.
that's how I was. When I was a youth
Yeah.
pastor, I'd say wild stuff,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
preaching heresy.
Yeah, I'm actually doing a communicators training for all of our youth teachers next month to help them with that. Because when I was 18, 19 preaching, I got debriefed heavily, like demolished, but never really taught how to preach in the beginning. And so I want to set up a culture of feedback in youth, but I want to set them up well before I even have that, green light to give them feedback. And so, teaching people how to, because communicating is one thing. Preaching the text
Oh, that's another
is
thing.
a whole other beast.
Yeah.
Bro, I remember when I was like, first like 7 years of preaching, I never knew if my sermon was going to be good or bad. Because I might have prepared like 12 hours, and I go up there, I'm like, what just happened?
Yeah.
Other times I prepare like 45 minutes. I just killed
Oh
it.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
for sure.
How do you bust out sermons like when you have 3-4 days? Like, have you got a rhythm now? Because that would give me a lot of anxiety.
Most of the time, I'm working on multiple ones at
At one
once.
time.
Yeah.
Wow.
So the way it tends to work is I have my notes app on my iPhone, and then I have structured. It doesn't always get to work this way, but I'll have 2 or 3 sermons lined up with the understanding of knowing where I'm going, and then I roughly work on them as things come. And so during devotional time, I'm rereading a lot of the text that I feel each kind of sermon goes with. And then as soon as normally Wednesday or Thursday hits, that's when I lean into the one that I'm about to preach on that Sunday. And so then I crank that one out. And sometimes as I'm working on that, because in my back thought, I have these other messages going on, there may be something I'm working in this sermon, and I'm like, oh man, this application or this story would actually go good for the one I'm doing in 2 weeks. So then I'll just go to my phone real quick and annotate, that for that message. And then I'll go back to studying for the one coming up that Sunday. So then by the time I come to next week and I hit Wednesday again, that sermon is actually 50% finished because I've already, so then I just keep getting kind of ahead of it and sandwich it. So then now I can structurally each time, at any given point, I'm really only finishing 50% of the message because half has already been processed and ideas. And I get the most thoughts and inspiration when I listen to other preachers. So I love sitting in church. I love when I'm not speaking, I love to sit in service and I'm like processing my sermon coming up, and I get so much good revelation from that sermon that it's just like, it just kind of helps me lean into a little more. Or I listen to my friends, their sermons during the week when I'm driving in the car, and I'll be like, man, what Will said was really good. I try not to like, I rarely like take something from someone, but what they said will inspire an offshoot thought that, that I'll just annotate it really quick.
I wanted to steal that Paris story. I texted out. I think I was out of town somewhere speaking, and I was like, "Yo, dog, I just ended speaking, but I just watched your sermon." I was I was dying. I don't laugh that hard from preachers because preachers aren't that funny.
Yeah.
I was dying. I turned around. So now I was like, "Oh my god!" You know,
Yeah,
anyways.
if Pastor Adam wasn't a pastor, he'd be definitely a comedian, like 100%.
Comedians are people I study.
Oh my god.
So Chappelle,
Oh, they're great people to study.
Cat
Mike
Williams,
Epps.
Andrew Schultz. I'm like, Mike Epps hilarious. I'm like,
They're great.
How did he just transition?
Yes.
That? I didn't even
They're
know.
the best transitions.
Oh my
Ridiculous.
gosh.
The best
So
trend.
But what
Yes.
people don't know is like by the time we see them on stage, they had done that special like 40 times.
Yes.
Right. But preachers,
Yeah.
hot
It's your
off the
only
press.
one.
It's like
Yeah.
I do it once and I'm almost probably
That's
never
it.
going to do
Never
it
gonna do that
again.
again.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, like we heard back when Kevin Hart did his second big special 10 years ago, me, Harry, and a couple buddies, and then Ashley, when we got engaged, we all went down because Kevin Hart was working on material at the Brea Improv, and he had a piece of paper, and 50% of it was just trash.
That's
And then we
inspiring.
actually saw the final Netflix special, and he did a lot of the jokes he did that night, and they
Yeah.
were just like so refined, so perfect, so hilarious. But we heard it wrong. And there was one time like he said something in the room, and no one even laughed, and he pulled out a pen and he was like, well, that won't be going on the special. And he's in front of everyone, and then everyone laughed at that, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah,
But
yeah.
like that was dope. Whereas to your point, like with preaching, like you just pretty much got one shot at it. If you
Yeah.
have two services, you get two, and then might get better at that point, but then you almost never use it again, or you won't use it
Yeah.
again for like, I try to not rotate a thought or a story every 3 to 4 years is when I know, and they're all in my phone and they all have dates on them from the notes. So I'll know when, like if I go like, if let's just say I have a thought of a story, I'll type it in my phone to see if I ever told it, and it'll be like, 2017 I told that. So I'm like, okay, I could tell that again with like a new application to it to help
that's great.
broaden it.
That's one of the things, as you're sharing that about like Kevin Hart, a lot of young communicators, because of like social media, like they get exposure too fast. But I feel like for me, my gym was being a youth pastor. I had to preach every week 2 to 3 times for like 8 years before it was ever online.
Yeah.
And I realized then I was working out. I was getting my reps in.
Yeah.
I was doing gym work. I was on that treadmill. So now that when I'm preaching, I remember a few years ago when I first started to get kind of like, I guess, attention from like the evangelical mainstream. And oftentimes I'd be like, yo, where'd you come from, dog? Like, we never heard of you. And I was like, bro, I've been working.
Yeah. I've been grinding.
I've been grinding in this immigrant church for 15 years. Y'all just didn't recognize me. But all that grinding, all that work, now I'm in these spaces where I'm like, oh my gosh, like that was a gym that was developing me for like what God is having me do now. You know?
That's so great.
And do you think as speakers, as you move on in the years, as you do it, do you still get nervous? What about that point? Like, is there still nerves, or do you think as you do it more, you're like, not really?
I want to give up preaching every week.
People don't know, dog.
Every Friday
Share
at like
with us,
7
please.
p.m.
Oh, people don't know.
Every
bro.
How do you guys
Friday
feel
about
on
7
Mondays?
p.m.
Sweating or what?
I feel exhausted on Monday.
It's like you ran a
and then I know on
marathon or
Tuesday I got to start over again.
Yeah.
So that's the stress of a Monday. You're like, I got to rest. You have to rest. If you're doing, main communication, you have to rest your mind on. You got to do nothing, or else if you don't,
Your body.
then Tuesday comes and you're back to studying again, and your mind is still running from Sunday, and like thoughts start merging and your stress levels start getting high, and so you start getting anxious. And, every Friday about
People
7
don't know
p.m.
that.
I want to.
What are some tips to do to recover after? I mean, probably it works differently for everybody else, huh?
Most people say like do what you enjoy.
Rest
have
your
fun,
voice.
rest your voice, but like do nothing, so like take a nap, watch cartoons, watch a movie, go to a
Completely
park,
disconnect.
like whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you like going to the gym, go to the gym. Do what your mind separates the most from and rest it. That's pretty much what most would say, but you get the same way about like Friday and Saturday. You're about those times, you're just like,
I'm
like everybody's gonna hate me tomorrow. They're gonna hate this.
for sure.
I know this isn't gonna go well. I think
100%.
about that stuff all the time.
There's like so many different. Man, I could talk about this for like 2 hours on this podcast about preaching and communication. It's like I'm not as nervous as I used to be because at least I now know before I go on stage if it's gonna be good or bad. I know.
Yeah.
I know now. Back in the day, I was like, I don't know. See what happens. And I get off stage like, God, what the frick? Now I'm like, okay, this is not gonna be that good. And just embrace it. You're going to suck a little bit
you got
today.
nothing else to do.
You got nothing else to do.
Like, you can't go remake it.
Yeah, and I tell myself, just get on first base. Don't try to hit a home run.
Yeah.
You're a pastor. You're not an evangelist. Like, get to base 1. Next week, get to base 2. And if you're lucky, you hit a home run. So I have to change my mentality.
Yeah.
But then now that I've been speaking in like different, like there's levels to this. There really are. There really truly is levels to this. And like certain, like I just came back from Exponential.
Yeah.
5,000 senior pastors.
Yeah.
Right?
One of the largest.
I was nervous.
Yeah.
I got cotton mouth. I was like, yo, give me 2 bottles of water, And I remember, so like it's interesting.
You're a mess.
Like I have this thing, right? Because again, Bishop Jakes, he says, study yourself full, think yourself clear, pray yourself hot, and let yourself go. When I'm nervous, I don't let myself go. And I study myself too hard. And then I try to think too clear, and I don't pray, and I don't let myself go. So at Exponential, I remember before I went up, I was like, you better let yourself go.
Yeah.
Better not look at your notes. Like, you got it, son. Like, don't trip. Like, just
great.
let go. And I remember, like, about 5 minutes in, I was like, oh, I'm gone. Like, I let
flying.
it go. I'm going now. But I get nervous all the time. All the time. But more so in, like, newer stages.
Yeah.
And then,
Okay.
after I preach 3 in a row, I'm, like, dead.
Yeah.
Like, if I do 3 Sundays in a row, because they're all fresh sermons.
Yeah.
I'm not going to the recycling bin and I'm like, I'm cooking a meal, and then by the 3rd week, my wife knows, like, oh, he's
shot.
He's exhausted, and so
I
usually,
try not to go past 3 either.
yeah. So me too,
3 is
3, and I'm
exhausting.
like, I gotta take 1 or 2 off.
Yeah.
And, but I don't know when I was a youth pastor though. I was doing 3 a week.
Yeah. They just weren't good.
Exactly. That's what I realized. It was just like I got a piece of paper like, walk on water, faith. Don't look at the winds. Look at Jesus. I'm good. Let's go. Hey, y'all.
Rooted. You're doing a sermon series like Rooted. And
But now it's like politics.
Yeah.
LGBTQ. Now it's
divorced person, single person in their 50s, wanting a husband. You got, single
It's
mother. You got,
it's
all
like
these
finances.
concepts.
It's like
marriage. Yeah.
And so now
Trying
it's
to-
just like after I preach, I feel like, you're just and preaching is like you're exposing
Exposed.
yourself and say,
Yeah.
shoot me, like shoot me wherever you are.
Number one fear in the world is public
It's public speaking.
So it's like,
It's wild.
it feels that. You've been doing youth ministry over 10 years. So what aspect of youth ministry is still makes you nervous? And what aspect used to make you nervous that doesn't anymore?
I would say just the fresh batch of new students that come through the door, like a new freshman.
So does it feel like the first day of high school for you too, when a new batch comes in, like maybe from a junior high or from elementary school?
Because
It's
in
like-
my mind, I'm like, I want to get to know them. I want to disciple them. It goes beyond just the preaching and I do the same model you have. I have notes in my phones.
Yeah.
That has everything. But I would say that component keeps me still in it. I get excited about that. So that's all.
I just talked to a youth student that I youth pastored a long time ago, and he, I think he went to prison. He was doing some other stuff, had to go to rehab, stuff like that. Recently gave his life to Christ after 13 plus years, and we were talking, and he just was like, "Thank you. You were always nice to me." You know, just came from a very, very dark background. But he said what stood out to him. He said, you were always nice to me as a youth pastor.
That's crazy.
You know,
Yeah.
you never, you know, I was so used to everyone talking down on me or everyone. I said, because I believed you were a good kid. You know, and he was like, well, I wasn't. I said, no, you got to hear me. We were, you know, the theological side is you're a sinful piece of crap. You know, but the side of truth was like, you were good. Like the Lord knew you were good, regardless of what you were involved in at the time, regardless of what you did afterwards. Like you had the capacity of God's goodness in you, and that's who I was speaking to every week that I saw you, not who was standing in front of me. Yeah. And then he was just like, yeah, thanks, man. It's not like
we were just at a conference last week, the youth pastor conference, and Pastor Levi Lesko spoke, and he said something that really resonated. He said, working with the next generation and speaking is like writing a verse in a song you'll never fully hear. And you have to be okay, or at least content and confident knowing that you wrote a verse in their song, and the song will end up good, but you might not be the one that writes the full song. And so finding contentment in, I had a little piece in that, and we pray that in 10, 15 years, you have those moments where it's like, you were just nice, you know? You were just there.
And youth kids don't care about your sermons.
They
No.
do.
They
That's
don't.
nothing
They
I
don't.
remember back in.
That's what I know. Like this next generation, they care about stability and consistency more than your words.
Yeah.
100%.
If they see you up there every week, and that's a stable model, but then you're consistent in being nice to them, you know, caring for them beyond
sure.
Yep.
the sermon. They're going to remember that versus your stories and your sermons.
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
than anything else.
Yeah, they remember more about like, hey, how's mom, or what's going on at home?
100%.
How's the divorce going? How are you feeling? You know, it's like blah blah blah. Like
100%.
they remember that way more
100%.
than they remember your 3 Ps on.
And I feel like that's where youth ministry is going towards. Creating a culture of hospitality, but also diving into their needs, mental health, mental illness. That's the future.
Yeah, the biggest difference I saw from doing youth ministry for so many years to adult ministry, like there's a lot of differences, but the largest difference is adults choose to go to church, youth don't. And so like preaching should express those two thoughts. Every Sunday I get to talk to a group of people who decided to get dressed, decided to grab their keys, decided to get in their car, decided to show up. Even if they showed up 20 minutes late, they still decided to show up. Their children that they brought and put in youth ministry did not choose to be there. For sure. And they will, through time, maybe like it and appreciate it. But if most of them, especially in the context we're doing, which is the minority church, most of the time, and unfortunately parents nowadays do give them too much decisions, but if they fully gave them the decision to go or not, majority of them would say no. And so you're talking to a group that is there because they'll get in trouble if they don't show up.
100%.
They don't sit there. And so it's much more of a missions field than it
100%.
is a church. You know, it's not really youth church because majority of those students have yet to make this real for them. It's a youth missions outreach. And so preaching, you would do whatever. You know, if I sent you to the ghetto or I sent you to a third world country, how would you preach?
Yeah.
You know, that's how youth ministry should be preached, you know. And so you do heavy on allegories, heavy on stories, heavy on illustrations. You don't get too weighty because you need they have to grab. You know, I'm going to teach them the Bible. They don't want to learn the Bible yet. You know, and there's aspects it should be happening, but it should be like, you know, the way that I serve my son medicine. I put a little bit in apple juice and I have him drink it and I just tell him it's apple juice. Yeah. And then eventually
100%.
The medicine is getting inside of him. And then now, you know, my oldest is old enough that I can give him the little medicine and kick it back because he's like, I'm good. Like, now you can start. And every youth student is different. But so some may catch it at 14. Others may not catch it till they're 25. So you're just, you know, you're putting in legwork of just preaching the gospel every week.
That's one of the things I tell when I have like a former youth speaker transition to like speaking on our stage and I'm mentoring. I say like, because they spend a lot of time trying to win the audience.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, yo, people here, you don't need to win them. You just got to feed them.
Yeah.
So like with youth kids, you got to spend the first 25 minutes, you got to win them. Like you're with them, you're funny, like you know what you're talking about, you're cool.
100%.
And then once you win them, then you feed them. I'm like, with adults, you're like wasting their time. They're like, look, I'm good with your jokes.
Get into it, bro.
Get into it, dog. Like, this is your fourth story about your wife. I heard it the first time 3 months ago. Like, feed me. So I would tell a lot of the newer communicators who were who were used to youth, once you get on stage with adults, just feed them. They came here because they want food.
That's great.
Yeah. I even tell communicators, like, you don't have to honor us. You don't have to spend time talking. Like, don't do any of that. You could just say, thank you, Pastor Adam, for having me or something. But like, don't spend 5 minutes. You don't have to build our culture. Our culture's built. Our people are built. I know you appreciate me. You're here. You said yes. Like, you only have 35 or 40 minutes to get into your message. Don't spend 5 thanking the first member, thanking the senior pastor, thanking the senior pastor's wife. Like, I always tell them, if you want to say something, just say thanks for having me. I love your pastor. I love your church. You don't have to do any honorifics. It means well, but like, I want you to get into the message. Yeah. Our people came not to hear you honor me. They came to hear the word preached. Yeah. And you bring a unique voice to our church that we don't normally have. So let's get into it.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, and I love most if someone tells me that if I guest speak, or else I feel like I have to do that thing. And then I feel like, well, I just lost. They gave me 35 minutes. I just lost 5 minutes thanking every the audio people and thanking the backstage and thinking, it's like
the longer they're thanking you is the less they prepare the message.
Yeah, exactly.
It's, oh my God, I gotta have some time. Some filler in here.
I was walking your property is beautiful. Get into it, bro.
Dude, now I feel honored that I didn't know you were so picky about your speaking. That fact that you had me come and speak, bro. Now I'm like, dude, Adam, shoot.
I listened to you enough. I knew you wouldn't do anything.
Adam does his homework, that's for sure. Dude.
Oh yeah. I'll listen to a lot of sermons before I ask someone to come. Yeah.
Hey, I had a thought. There was a season where you were speaking a lot. Outside. What changed to made you shift to now focus on just staying here?
Yeah, I want to say like maybe last year, the last 2 years, I probably had 40 or 50 invitations, and I said yes to maybe 3. And so, and a lot of times the invitation will be like, hey, if you ever want to come to Seattle, give me a call. We'd love to have you. And then I just don't give them a call. So that's kind of what I mean by an invitation. Maybe 10 or 15 formal invitations through emails that, would just say, hey, Adam's not able to make it happen. The main reason, that I stopped doing it was, number one, it's a lot on my family. It's a lot on my wife. It's a lot on the kids. I want to be as present as possible with the kids. I have a lot of vision for our church. So I'm involved and you guys know this, like I'm involved in a lot of the nuts and bolts of our church still. So I like seeing our church doing what we're doing right now. And so traveling kind of takes away from that. And second of all, I'll kind of, I'll say yes to someone that I feel like we're doing life with and we build with. I don't tend to want to say yes if it's, I just feel like you want to use whatever it is, the gift or the following to get people to come to that night or whatever it is. And so I'll tend to not want to take those because those are the ones that normally come with a bunch of like rigmarole and hoops you jump through. And whereas like my friends or people I do life with that have churches, ministries, it's kind of just like, we're gonna come, we're gonna have dinner, we're gonna talk ministry, we're gonna love your people. And then I feel like there's no dance we have to play. And so I didn't really like the ministry dance anymore. And I pulled away from it because, and what's crazy was that was my dream for most of my ministry life, was to be a guy who traveled and preached around the world. Like that is how I defined I did a website very young and all these things like it because I believed that like that was for me, that was going to be the epitome of ministry. And I remember this summer, I forget how it was worded, but this summer I was having dinner with Rich Wilkerson Jr. and somehow this topic got brought up. And I said, for majority of my young ministry life, I just wanted to be Rich Wilkerson Jr. Not in his preaching style, but in his ministry, like how he traveled the world and he was, we called them the Rat Pack of preachers. You had Carl Lynch, Judah Smith, Chad Veach, Rich Wilkerson Jr., Robert Madu, and they were like the Rat Pack of preachers that just traveled all over and preached. And they were like seen as the epitome of communicators. And then I actually found like, I actually don't want to be defined as a great communicator. Like as I got older, I was like, actually, that is not the highest compliment I wish to have for my life. And I don't mind anyone who wants that. Anyone who says, I want to be the best preacher in the world. I want to be the next T.D. Jakes. I want to be the next Judah Smith. I mean, more power to you. But if I had that decision to be that tomorrow, I wouldn't want that. Because I've seen so many of them, their churches are hard to lead in transition because people come just to hear them speak and they don't do anything else.
Yes.
They don't engage
So
in
true.
community. They're not, many of them aren't real disciples of Jesus. And most of those pastors, they don't even want that culture. It's just that's what was created by them being one of the world's best communicators.
100%.
And so I was like, actually, I don't want that. So the more I go and preach around and all that, the more it solidifies that concept that I want to be a great communicator. So I would just love to be a great church leader, church innovator, church, pastor to pastors. I mean, though I'm young, like in the long run, that's what I would much more prefer. And that to me, that doesn't take having to take away from my church in any way. I can still be present to our church and people, and I don't have to be gone all the time. So if I am gone, it's either to make our church better or to solidify a kingdom relationship that helps our church become much more part of the capital C church, the true Catholic church. You know what I'm saying?
This is why I've always respected Adam from the first time we met. You could tell he's a pastor. He's apostolic, but he's a pastor in his heart. So that was something I've always was like, oh, this brother's the real deal right here. So
100%. And it's very rare that you find a lot of pastors who are gifted in communication that want to be home with their people. And so I appreciate that as well. It's like you're here, you're accessible, you're our pastor instead of constantly being out. And so, because it's easy to get caught up in that game, and also scary. I remember talking to somebody, and he was like, "You have a lot of these communicators who are traveling the globe, building up other churches, but they don't have a covering of their own. How dangerous
you know what else
could that be?"
You know what else people don't talk about? Guest speaking is not real. It's a fake world. You're not actually living in reality. It's like when you go to Disney, right? Everything just kind of pauses, and you come home, you're like, fudge.
Yeah.
That if you're a traveling guest speaker, you're not living in the real world most of the time you're out there.
Yeah.
Because you're being treated with honor.
Yeah.
You're being paid to do this. You're being treated like a guest, and guests have extra. But then you come back home, you're like, how come my people aren't treating me like this? How come my people don't appreciate me? I was like, it's because this is home. Home is
in a
where
fake
you're
world right now.
Exactly. You're living in a virtual reality that's not even real. It's a spiritual fake reality. And it's oftentimes when you get caught up in that.
And it's a drug.
It's literally a drug. So I'll tell you a story at Exponential. This is probably my favorite moment, right? I go and I speak, and God moved, did his thing. And the next morning, I'm in the speaker's lounge, 8 a.m, early, getting breakfast with a friend of mine, and one of the OGs, Jeff Vanderstelt. He's an OG in that world. He comes up to me and he grabs me, and he goes, "I am so worried for your soul." I was like, he's like, "Because you did so well that now it's not going to end." And he was like, "You know what this is? These are a bunch of drug addicts." Straight to my face. He's like, "There's a bunch of drug addicts."
Who was this that said it?
Jeff Vanderstelt. He's the man. He's a legend. He's an OG. Him and Dave Ferguson, that crew.
Oh, okay.
And he's not shading. He's throwing shade on people.
No,
he's
I
just,
get what you're
he's just
saying.
being
Yeah,
honest.
100%.
And he was like, "This is a bunch of drug addicts." And he's like, "There's two types of drug addicts: people who love the stage, and people who love putting people on stage." And he looked at me. And he pleaded with me. He was like, "Please don't let these people use you." He's like, "Please, Will." He's like, "I'm so proud of you. I followed your journey, but now it's a different level." He's like, "Don't let these drug addicts use you for themselves."
Yeah.
And I was like, and that was my favorite moment.
What did that do to you?
It was just super affirming. It's super. I mean, it's already the journey I've been on, but just to hear that again from a OG, he's there. It's not like he's not there. He knows what's going on. He knows there's a calling to it.
Yep.
And he just pulls me aside. And he's like, "Please."
And he's a part of the machine, so he's not rebuking the machine. He's rebuking how quickly we can individually abuse something, and how though a process is healthy and something can be healthy, each individual themselves without deep reflection can turn something into.
And he's been in the game for decades, so he actually starts naming people that we would all know.
Yeah.
He's like, "What do you think happened to them? They started like you. but they got hooked on drugs. What do you think happened to that person? What do you think? And he was like, and why do you think they were even platformed with such bad character? Because those people who are addicted to platforming people, they were just using them for their own agenda. He was just going, and it was such a fatherly like moment, and he was just, I'm proud of you, but I'm so worried for you.
Yeah.
Stay on the ground. And I was like, amen, sir. Like,
yeah, to me, that's like, and there's different versions, but that to me, that's a very true definition of what a prophetic word can be for someone. Like he
100%.
wouldn't even call it a prophetic word. He would just say, "Oh,
Yeah.
I just wanted to give wisdom." But like that's what's really led by the Spirit. That you say, "Hey, man, I caught it. I receive it." There's a warning behind it, but there's also a belief in me. And to me, that's what a real prophetic word looks like for somebody. Sometimes people are looking for a word that tells their future, and that stuff can happen sometimes. But most of the time, it would come in a way that it did, like he did, which was massive amounts of a belief in you, while also a weariness to say, we know where this can go if you don't stay. In your lane, accountable,
100%.
stay connected to the cross, all those things like that.
100%. Yeah, and he beelined me too. He just saw me sitting down. He's like, hey, hold on, let me talk to him real quick.
Yeah.
Because he could do that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, all right,
That's dope.
salute. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And we need that, so, but anyways.
Yeah, that's dope. But my dad, he had told me since I was probably about 21 years old, he said, my worry for you, and it was when I was going into ministry, and he hadn't said it in a very long time, but he would say it like once a month for like 7 years. He would say, my greatest worry for you is that your talent will outride your prayer life. And he said, because he would tell me, you're so gifted that you'll never know whether you did it on your own or you did it by the power of God. Because he said, you could do it on your own. He said some people, he'd be like, me, I need the power of God. If I do it on my own, the whole thing would crumble. He said, you have enough gift that you could be successful without God, and it would crumble you and it would hurt other people. And he's like, my greatest prayer is that you can recognize the difference between success with God's hand and success with your own hand, and you know how to make the right decision on what to do. And then basically the fix was never let your gift outwork your prayer life. And that was always his, like, he said that for years, that it just like ingrained all the time, you know. And it's like moments like that with those like sages that just like you better listen to it, or you can get eaten alive. Like they're saying it for a reason.
100%.
I would say one last thing, and in line to this, like, I think being younger leaders, and maybe not everyone's as egotistical as I am, but like I'm tempted, like, oh man, it's a new opportunity. Like, wow, like this is great. And then one of my mentors once told me, he's like, bro, they need you more than you need them. And that he was trying to affirm me. Yeah. He's like, because all these institutions are run by relevance and they're run by the next gen. So as much as you think, wow, they're giving me an opportunity, he's like, they're using you, dog.
They wouldn't be asking you unless there was something
so the essence was just know your worth.
No one's doing anyone a favor.
Yeah,
that's the reality.
Right? Yeah. That's why relationships are so important to me now. Yeah. Like, it's everything to me now. Because everything could be bought almost, right? But it's like, this is a friend, this is a mentor, this is a little bro. And even Jesus, everything was based on relationships, right? In a society that's based on platform, power, position, and all that stuff. So all that to say,
you know how sometimes people be like talking out loud and they ask stuff they really shouldn't, you know? One time not too long ago, I got asked from someone, like, what does it take to like have someone speak on your platform? And then I was like, oh, really? It's be a friend. And then they were like, oh, well, how do they become your friend? I said, by not asking questions like that.
That's crazy.
That's what it takes.
That's hilarious.
That's why everybody needs to read 48 Laws of Power, 48 Laws of Power to know. I'll play it.
Exactly. Did your pops ever have any like sound sage wisdom like that? For those that don't know, but Heron's dad recently went home to be with the Lord, but his dad's like a powerhouse in the Assemblies of God community.
He would always say the foundation of your ministry is your prayer life.
Well,
he would always, he would say it in Tongan. Fai lotu, ke goa ke hau ke taimeni, meaning like make sure you pray before you leave the house. So it's like that's your foundation for anything in life. So that's one
dope.
of the key things I remember. Yeah,
that's a good one. Did he have any other one? That's a good one.
The Holy Spirit.
Oh,
AOG, you know, because
course.
he's like, we often talk about God the Father, God the Son, and God the Word, but make sure it's God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. So whenever I'm preaching, I'm thinking of like, man, don't forget the third person of the Trinity. Like when I'm, you know, sermon prepping or get platforms or be able to talk to people, it's like, don't forget the Holy Spirit. Yeah. So
your youngest brother said something dope at the homegoing. He and you could probably say it better, but he basically said your dad would say, you know, when you're preaching the Bible, don't forget the author who wrote it. It was something like that. Was that what he would say?
That's
like
what it
that?
was, yeah.
Okay, yeah. His brother was like, my dad would always remind me, like, when you're preaching, preach the word, preach the word, preach the word. That's important. But don't forget the one who wrote it, the Holy Spirit. So make sure the Holy Spirit's in it when you're preaching. Know how to speak to the people. Know how to let the Spirit have space. Blah 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 blah. And then when his brother said that, I was like, dang, that's dope. Aaron's dad was a gangster, bro. Yeah.
And multiple times rightly divide the word of God was spoken, like in the homegoing, that was a thing he constantly said. We need those sages because that stuff doesn't go away. Yeah.
Because what's crazy was, a lot of people don't know, everything was paid for from donations from other pastors that were influenced from him who didn't like him.
Who what?
Who didn't like him. Like they didn't like his style of preaching. They didn't like his you know, the way he they said he was just too word, too Holy Spirit.
Okay.
So it just showed you know, his character outweighed all that negativity.
Yeah,
Even that
that's
negativity,
crazy.
they still donated to be able to cover the whole funeral.
At the end of the day, they knew
$30,000.
he was
Like,
the real
that's-
deal.
And I'm like, man,
Yeah, that's the old
That's
adage. You
but-
don't have to like me, but you will respect me.
Respect me.
You know?
I was set a
That's the
table
perfect expression.
Right.
of
you
that.
in the presence of your enemies.
Yeah.
That's dope, man.
That's why I didn't know that.
yeah,
That's
so
crazy.
some of them were there, and I'm like,
They did not get along.
no, they ain't
Wow.
Yeah, so I'm like,
Because if they were AOG, then that means they were very, you know, maybe one verse and then 40 minutes of talking and anecdote and Holy Spirit moments
Yeah,
and stuff.
yeah.
But your dad would probably like sit in the text and then
In the
leave
text.
space. Yeah. His dad was the first Tongan in all of Assemblies of God denomination to get his doctorate.
Wow.
Yeah. That's what everyone kept emphasizing. I was like, dang, that's a big deal to represent your entire, that's like winning a first Olympic gold medal for a country, like to hold a first theological doctorate. And then probably almost any Tongan period in any denomination.
and he did it in 2
for
years.
that. Yeah. It's just
Wow.
crazy.
Yeah, so he was a really smart guy. Yeah.
That's amazing, man.
Yeah, that's dope. All right, buddy. What a great episode. Thanks for joining us. It's more like a Seinfeld episode. It was an episode about nothing. That was great in conversation.
We talked about preaching, talked about leadership, talked about Viola, master.
It's like a Seinfeld episode. It's like at the
about
end,
Paul
it's
Washer.
rich, it's
Yes,
funny,
right,
but it
baby.
also had no theme in the whole
Those are the
thing.
best.
Yeah. So then we're going to end this right now, and then I have to come back and actually do the intro for the podcast because I forgot that.
That's right.
So
Because we're family now, bro.
we'll hit that, and then we'll give Alex an annotation to cut this intro. So everybody, thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed this, if you got any old heads that have been in your life that gave sound wisdom, I'd like to see the comments or tag us on Instagram and tell us a sage that's ever said something to you. That'd be dope to hear. All right, well, see you guys.
Peace.
Peace.